When did you have the most difficult time staying professional? About 6 months ago, I'm sitting in a meeting with higher level Microsoft reps along with all of the management and directors of our IT department. Essentially, it was a meeting where Microsoft was trying to sing the praises of their Intune product. I had been demoing internally for 3 months and they wanted to get my feedback, so I gave it to them. They were expecting me to come out and announce my love for it, but I gave them my honest feedback with many reasons and examples about why it wasn't right for our organization. After about 10 minutes, the lead Intune guy started talking over me and changing the subject. The meeting ends and I start getting ready to leave when the Intune guy hands me his card and says something about looking forward to working together. I took his card and involuntarily said "oh boy" in front of my boss and my director and all these Microsoft managers. I didn't sleep that night. By far the most unprofessional moment of my career. When a guy for whom I was coordinating breakdown assistance refused to give me any location other than the town he was in and that he was opposite Peter the rapist's house. I had to call the tow truck operators and tell them that the guy was opposite Peter the rapist's house. The best part? They knew exactly where I meant. Never change. Island. An elderly lady complained to me that her broccoli hadn't been cooked properly. It was kale, and it had been. I found out my fiancé had been cheating on me about an hour into a 12-hour overnight hotel desk shift. I still want my Oscar for no customers seeing the inner turmoil of my life ripping itself apart through the veneer of customer service polish. Crap, that sounds rough AF. Sorry you had to go through that. I'd have fricked off immediately. Hope you're better off now. I'm a wedding planner. We had an unexpected death in the family. Our 6-month-old nephew had passed away in his sleep. I knew the funeral was going to be the day my client's upcoming wedding. I gave her a call to explain the situation. She's clearly not paying attention to the call or the words I'm speaking because I hear her laughing with friends in the background. I get irritated and tell her I'll call her later. I call back that night and again tell her what has happened and that I'd be sending an assistant to cover for me so I can attend the funeral. She tells me that I need to send my assistant to the funeral and that I better be at her wedding. It took me a few seconds, but I calmly stated that I'd be sending her money back and that no one would be covering for me. Nicest way I've ever said frick off. I really wanted to slap her. Was a pizza delivery driver who brought a manager to a management meeting. I wasn't really supposed to be there, but I was well liked and helped them out a lot so I got to stay. They were talking about how they were having some problems with the drivers doing what they're asked when one of the AMs said we need to remind them that they're easily replaceable and that anyone can do their job. I think that was the most willpower I ever summoned to remain quiet. When I was teaching a 4th grade class in England one year, the headmaster told me that there was a teacher returning from mat leave and they would be team teaching with me. Alright, that's fine. Turns out that meant that I would only be teaching half the week, but I would still need to mark everything, including the stuff I didn't teach. Not cool, but whatever. Soon, I was locked out of meetings with parents. I wasn't considered a classroom teacher anymore, and I wasn't allowed access to my classroom on the days when I was in the school but didn't teach. I knew they were trying to push me out. I almost lost it one day when a parent had asked to have a meeting with me, and when I went to the meeting, I was told by the head teacher that my team teacher was attending instead, and they didn't need me. I quit 2 days later. I was so mad. I work IT. When people have two separate issues that are 100% unrelated but swear that they have to be related because they happen at the same time. I once had a lady who had a network and a printer issue at the same time. The printer refused to print in color. Also, her laptop was too far away from the router to get a strong connection. She was trying to print a 30-page color handbook 10 times so that they could be passed out for a training course. I demonstrated that her machine was having no issues printing as it printed one page in grayscale but refused to print one page in color even though the settings were accurate. I tried downloading the drivers, but her internet kept cutting out and making me lose the session for a few seconds at a time when we tried to download the driver. I demonstrated that the two issues were 100% not related, but she kept stating that the internet was causing her color printing to fail to her co-workers in the office. She even covered the receiver with her hand and talked to her co-worker about how the internet should have nothing to do with the printing in color. I said it doesn't without thinking. She asked me to repeat myself. I apologized and said I was talking to a co-worker about this issue and forgot to mute my mic. I asked her to physically walk closer to the router and showed her that the printer still refused to print in color now that she had a strong signal. I showed her how they are completely unrelated. I downloaded the new driver for her PC, tested a color page and had her print her stupid large order at the very end. So why would the internet have an effect on my ability to print in color but not B&W? When a parent told me that the only reason I was a special education teacher was because I wasn't good enough to teach normal kids, even thinking about it now gets me heated. That doesn't even make sense to me. All things considered, special ed seems like the hardest branch of teaching. I'm a translator and recently was asked to translate a magazine article about the history of smutty literature, talking about stuff like the School of Venus. This particular client speaks English quite well and actively reviews my translations, so I'll usually send her the file and then she'll send it back with comments or clarifications or suggestions for words she'd prefer that I use. That's how I ended up in a professional discussion about which terms to use to describe whipping in a BDSM context. When a parent of one of my students said "TikTok, you don't have forever," referring to me having children, a week after I had a miscarriage. My own mother said that to me after I'd had a miscarriage, and when I was angry with her about what she said, she says, "Oh, get over it. It's not like it was an actual baby." Whenever I work on a feature that gets cancelled before anybody even sees it. I've spent over a year on a project that got scrapped. I was working at an internet provider when someone came in to pay his bill. Now, I've seen a lot of ridiculous last names and I've kept a straight face, but this time I couldn't help it. His last name was Asman. I broke up laughing in front of him and apologized profusely. He was pretty chill about it and was like, "It got me a lot of action in high school." For the record, he pronounced it Asmen. A woman I worked with had some serious mental problems and was heavily medicated. Obviously no one at work knew this because while she was always kinda catty and bitchy, she never did anything strange. One morning I'm pulling in as she is walking in and she stops to talk to me. She starts asking about my wife and then tells me how sexy she is. I was like, thanks, and she walked into the building. From there she walks into the office of a very flamboyantly gay employee and proceeds to hit on him like it's last call at the bar. He turns her down so she sits in one of the chairs in his office and proceeds to light up a cigarette. She doesn't smoke. He freaks out because he is worried she is high or something and doesn't want her to lose her job, so he escorts her back to her office. She proceeds to do a ton of other weird crap till one of the women in the office calls her husband. He explains the situation and that she must be off her meds, rushes over and picks her up. Poor woman ends up in an institution and leaves some very colorful messages on the answering machine for us. Apparently she also banged a couple of dudes at the institution and decided that she was going to ditch her husband and 2 kids for a fellow mental patient. Very sad, but also a very weird situation for those of us who had to deal with it. My former boss called for a staff meeting because someone drew a massive dong in a dusty window in the back of the office. Oh geez. A guy had an interview with my company and my co-workers and I were looking at his resume beforehand. We noticed that there were several spelling errors, including spelling projects as roject. So the guy comes in and I'm, along with a co-worker, interviewing him, giving technical questions and whatnot. He wasn't doing that well. The guy's back is to the rest of my office and the wall is glass, so see-through, obviously. In the middle of the interview, a co-worker on the outside looks at me and slowly raises a piece of paper from his desk, facing it towards me. On it is a single word in capital letters, roject. I had to excuse myself to get a drink of water when in reality I needed to catch my breath to prevent myself from cracking up. My friend works for welfare and got a chuckle out of a letter that repeatedly detailed a client's issues with heroin. It's a very different image. It's not a funny subject, but the misspelled word just came up so much. Not my current job, but when I was in college I worked as a garbage man for 3 summers straight. I have many stupid, sad, funny stories, and I also have one that would fit right here. During my first summer, there was a trash bin that we couldn't move for some reason. Like, even us 3 dudes in our late teens early 20s couldn't move that thing. So, we followed the protocol and just ignore it. It's not our responsibility to collect it if it's unmovable. After a few days, the man who the trash belonged to waited for us and asked us why we didn't collect it. We took the time to explain the situation, and he very calmly told us that he poured some concrete into his trash because people kept knocking it down. I'm not even joking. Half of his trash was filled with concrete. Flabbergasted, we basically told him that he had no right to do that. The trash belonged to the city, but when we told him that, he got angry and started yelling at us, saying that our attitude was unacceptable and he called us lowlifes and pieces of crap. He then proceeded to take the bags out of his trash, threw them on the floor and told us to pick it up. As you can imagine, there was nothing we wanted more at this moment than to punch him in his stupid face and just leave him amongst his bags of trash. But we would have been in big trouble had we done that, so we obviously didn't. And since it's against the rules to leave trash on the ground, we picked it up very carefully as he watched us with his smug smile and stayed professional. When we finished and went back on the truck, he told us to frick off. We replied, "Have a nice day, sir," and that was it. That was 8 years ago and I'm still pee about it. I have never wanted to get revenge for someone else so badly before. At least go back and throw trash on his lawn at night or something. I once had a piano student whose mother made him take music lessons. After several weeks it became apparent to me that the boy's heart wasn't in it and that allowing his mother to force him to continue was not in his best interest. When I explained this, his mother insisted that I continue teaching him, no matter what, and that if I didn't she'd spread the word that I had failed him as a student. At that point, I told her to do whatever she felt she had to because forcing a student to study music against his wishes would do harm long term, and that I wouldn't be party to it. I used to be a snowboarding instructor. I'd have parents drop off their kids with me so they could go to the bar. Needless to say, the kids were not at all interested in learning how to snowboard. Then the parents would get pissed at me for not making any progress and wasting their money. Needless to say, I didn't earn a tip that day. I worked at a marketing firm as a graphic designer out of college. When I started, we had a lot of perks that were great. Music in the office that came from a Groove Shark station that our department ran. Beer Fridays paid for by the company. Lots of communication over GChat. And I was mainly doing print design. Then they wanted me to start to code websites, which I learned how to do. And it slowly turned into exclusively doing websites. The company changed hands, and the perks slowly disappeared. The new CEO has learned business from working at a large Wall Street company, and he did everything he could to turn the 20-person company into a corporate nightmare. Beer Friday went from being paid for by the company to paid for by us individually, to not being allowed unless it was after 5. The CEO is quoted as having said, "I wouldn't mind if I never heard music again," which apparently is something that 10% of the population suffers from. So we couldn't listen to music anymore. The CEO hired his fiancée to be the financial manager and the HR person. So we effectively didn't have an HR department anymore. And then they started staggering when we could get lunch so we couldn't talk to co-workers over our lunch break. They even started having mandatory parties on the weekends for events like the Kentucky Derby. This is in New England, where no one cares about the Kentucky Derby. Finally, they completely stopped taking any feedback from employees about the direction the company was going in. It was my first job, and I didn't know how to deal with the rapidly declining situation. The powers that be decided we could only have one picture on our desk, so I used a 20x 30 inches framed picture I found on Craigslist, which was childish, but I thought it was funny. Morale was at an all-time low. I started to dread going to work every morning. Finally, they decided I wasn't a good culture fit, and they didn't renew my contract. Their official reason was that I hired an intern, which was balls because I interviewed the guy with my boss, and I didn't hire him. My boss told me to ask him to come in to do sample projects after 2 interviews, and that's what I did. After I left, he was offered a full-time position, and he still works there in my old position. It was the best thing to happen to me in my professional career. 6 months later, I got my dream job. I'm not paid as much. I haven't gotten a raise in 3 years. I don't have health insurance or retirement contributions. but I love my job and my coworkers are awesome. I did leave a Glassdoor review for the marketing company, and it led to them losing a $60,000 client, so that felt good. I've been helping my old coworkers find new jobs elsewhere since I left. 2. I teach English as a foreign language at a kindergarten in Japan. My students are 3 years old, so there's a lot of me and other teachers having to pull the mad face and telling students not to do something, and then laughing about it later on in the day. The romantic dramas that 3-year-olds are involved in is hilarious and would rival any romance novel. But one of them topped the cake and I had to fake a little coughing fit to distract from it. I've assigned the students to draw and color their favorite fruits, meaning they understand what fruit is, which fruit they like, and then the physical dexterity and motor skills to draw and color said fruit. Color choices are ignored because, well, kids like weird color combinations. All of the students are drawing and coloring their little bananas, and strawberries, and watermelons, and everything else they know and like. But one student isn't. Instead he drew him holding my hand with lots of smiles because, as I asked about it, I was his favorite teacher and he loved me. It was adorable and one of the sweetest things ever. Unfortunately it also wasn't the assignment, so I had to take it away and give him a new sheet of paper and go over the assignment with him. But I kept the picture because, well, it was the sweetest thing ever. And then he started chewing on my leg every time he saw me, so it's gotten a little awkward as I'm not exactly sure what being little Hannibal Jr.'s favorite teacher entails. But I'm betting there's fava beans and a nice Chianti in my future. Little did you know, he did in fact complete the assignment. You are his favorite fruit. I would say the coworker who took a fresh dump and placed it in the office microwave fits the criteria. Oh. Now it's whatever, but when I was just starting out in costuming, it was mostly the ridiculousness of some of the fittings I had to do. You try not to, but sometimes you have to giggle when you're fitting some guy and talking very seriously about how much room he needs added to the crotch of his Continental Army issue knee breeches because he has a big dong. Or have to try with all your might to not snap at a skinny butt Broadway actor who's whining when you put her actual measurement down and not some weird vanity size she thinks she is. You know what? Scratch the extra crotch room. You might as well just add a third leg hole. I used to work for a company that scheduled personal support workers to go see seniors in their home. I was taking over the desk from somebody else who did a similar job but with slight differences. I picked up the phone and a nice elderly gentleman calmly stated that he would like to order an escort. The only escort I had ever heard of at the time was of the nice pretty ladies that you can take out for a good time. I had a hard time believing that this gentleman thought that our company provided this kind of service. I didn't quite know what to say, but I remained professional and I requested a bit more detail just to be sure I understood what he was asking for. Turns out our company also provided personal support workers to take the elderly to and from medical appointments. Because my desk region I coordinated didn't provide this kind of service, I was unaware that our company as a whole provided this kind of service. Needless to say, I'm glad I kept my composure. My friend works at the VA nursing home. They have a gentleman that has a different young pretty niece that visits every time the social security checks come through, so not too far of a stretch for the guy to be ordering that kind of escort. Luckily you were mistaken. Had a guy threatening to put me on blast on the Facebook groups I actively sell buy trade pins on. He claims he ordered a pin from me months prior and never received it. Well, I go through all my PayPal transactions and there's not one that matches his name, nor any with money coming in that I didn't ship out. Finally find a transaction for him, and the reason he never got anything is because he ordered a pin and then filed a claim for a refund within the next 3 days. Showed him this and he tries to say he never got a refund, even though it shows clear as day the money in out and my account lines up. Finally made him log onto his PayPal and screenshot the transaction info, and wouldn't you know it, it says transaction cancelled, money refunded. Needless to say, I was really struggling not flipping out, as most of my income comes from this hobby, and your reputation means everything. My manager was my ex's sister. When I left my ex, who was an abusive alcoholic, and met someone new, she couldn't take it. Her and her boss, who I think she's having an affair with, would sign onto my computer prior to me coming into work and read my emails and log into my Facebook. My password was saved to my comp, and use what they found against me. Once I was 30 minutes late because the babysitter for my daughter cancelled last second and I had to find someone else, and when I came in, I was told it was a bull's excuse and my punishment was to put my cell phone in the car and only look at it on break. I had to bite my tongue until I found a new job and gave them only 1 week's notice through email. Once I left, she messages my mother to tell her I was pregnant, which she found out through looking through my Facebook messages, which I didn't want anyone to know about since I have horrible pregnancies and was being cautious and wasn't sure if I was keeping the baby. My mother told her, which is a lie, that she has had someone following her watching her cheat on her husband, and if she wants to keep trying to hurt me, she'll call her husband. Your mom's the best. You have been visited by the romantic doggo. Comment love is magic so you never fall in the friend zone. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.